because some things might not make sense right now, and that's okay, because a lot of things with case history, you have to understand more about the disorders. Specifically, I would say more about the disorders than anything else when you are kind of assessing a case history. But the nice thing about this is it actually highlights what disorders are related to what questions. And so this is from AIB. It's the case history form we use when we're training people off-site. So it's a case history form for people much like yourselves, mostly audiologists, but audiologists who have little to no experience working in Vistiv. So it's built to kind of help guide people who might not have as much clinical knowledge. Now, who can tell me what the most important thing we do during a vestibular eval when it comes to making a diagnosis for a patient? What would you say is the most important part of the whole evaluation? Yes, good job. Case history is the most important part. All of this equipment is great, but your brain is also very great. We were talking earlier, I mean, majority of patients, I could probably say 85, 90% accuracy based on just talking to the patient. And am I surprised sometimes? Absolutely. Things just surprise you. Patients are bad recorders. But if you know the right questions to ask, you'd be surprised how often you already know what to expect before you even hook the patient up to any equipment. And at the end of the day, that is so important, because all of this data is important, but if you don't know what the patient's functional complaint is, and your information, your tests don't help support something that's going to make that patient feel better, then we haven't really done our job. The biggest thing that Richard Gans taught me, and he's the founder of AIB, is function, function, function. He will always say, I don't care what any of the tests say, I don't care. I want to know why that patient is in our office. Why are they here? And I want to address that. And that's the thing, is you have to take all the testing aside. Dizzy patients are a unique patient population. They are an underserved population. They're a population that has typically seen, I think, upwards, the studies show, of 7 providers before being provided with a diagnosis for their dizziness or vertigo or whatever. And so this population, I mean, I've seen patients who have gone on disability, who have lost their jobs waiting to be seen by somebody. And so, A, we need more people within this field, and B, we need to, as providers, be able to empathize with our patients and know, even as audiologists, that it's a different patient population than our hearing patients. It's very different and similar in terms of showing empathy, but different in a sense that this population typically is going to be a lot more anxious, and they're going to want their complaint heard. And the best way to do that is by taking a case history that really touches on things with them and really makes it feel like you're there to take care of them. And I think it really helps build a connection, and then as you go through testing, that patient trusts you more, you build rapport, and it really helps them open up more. Because I will say, I've seen a lot of patients who tend not to open up because they've spent a lot of time telling doctors the same thing over and over and over and over again, without any improvement in how they're feeling. And so just keeping that in mind anytime you're seeing these patients is really important. But case history in general, the biggest things you have to touch on is, getting them to describe what they're feeling. Is it imbalance? I really like the way this describes it because, of course, we ask dizziness and balance both. We take vertigo completely out of the question. Patients don't know what vertigo is. They don't. It is a symptom, and people will say they have vertigo left and right, and sometimes they do, and many times they don't. They might be describing lightheadedness. They might be describing kind of like an internal sensation of dizziness. There's a lot of different ways to describe it, and it really does help change it. So the first step is making sure that you can figure out exactly what that patient is experiencing. And so I like this one because it takes vertigo out of it. So dizziness, imbalance, or both. And then it says what best describes your symptoms. So imbalance, falling more often, the world is spinning around you. So that would be true vertigo. Patient opens their eyes and objects are moving that shouldn't be moving. People don't want to admit to seeing things move unless they're actually moving. And it's a really great way to help decipher, are you seeing things move? Or alternatively, you feel as though you are spinning, but the room is not moving. That's also very, very common. Two very different symptoms though. One is going to be that actual hallucination movement. One is going to be more of an internal sensation, nausea, lightheadedness. So that really helps. How long does it last without stopping? Another really, really important thing to tie down, because again, many of these patients have not been listened to by providers, and they will sit there and tell you, I've been dizzy for months. And you're like, okay, but are you constantly dizzy, or does it come in episodes? I don't know, it lasts all the time. And so again, asking them more follow-up questions. If you stay perfectly still, do you have symptoms? Well, no. But if I lay down in bed, everything just starts moving and they'll just get on. So again, but if you stay perfectly still, how long does it last? That always helps. If you stay perfectly still, it starts and you do not move. How long does it last without stopping? That helps. Again, did it occur after any of these events? That can help point to what the specific diagnosis is. If we turn it over, again, can any of these things make it worse? Laying down, looking up, bending over, so we're hitting some BPPV ones. You can kind of read them over. We don't need to go over every single one of them. But essentially it just keeps going down. Have they improved, changed, stayed the same? We hit on some migraine questions that are highlighted in green here. So vestibular migraine is the second most common cause of vertigo and dizziness after BPPV. But there are a lot of studies out there that believe, or researchers that believe, that it is the most common cause. It's just wildly underdiagnosed. So being familiar with symptoms of migraine, signs of migraine, things like that, being comfortable asking those things, asking about fall history, and then getting into more of these dizziness symptoms. So you can see that they're highlighted with BPPV, vestibulopathy, which is going to be like your vestibular neuritis. So that's any kind of unilateral vestibular dysfunction, typically. Persistent postural perceptual dizziness, or 3PD. So that's going to be more of our psychogenic dizziness. Superior canal dehiscence syndrome, or SSCD. Those are very unique. You kind of can't miss that one if you read about it. If a patient comes in and they have it, it's pretty obvious based on their symptoms. You have cervicogenic dizziness, and then again getting more into the migraines, and then menopause for women, because that again does play a role. We do see a higher incidence of vestibular migraine in postmenopausal women. They're the classic women that come in, they'll say, oh, I haven't had migraines, since I had babies. That was my last migraine. This can't be migraines. And unfortunately, a lot of times that is when it comes on. It's usually this is nothing like the migraines I had in my 30s. And it just is something to be aware of, for sure. And we do know that when you're going through menopause, your hormones are kind of all over the place. And we do know that hormone-triggered migraines are quite common. So kind of knowing the common triggers for migraines is also really helpful in determining, is there a common denominator there? So keep this as a reference. I think it's a really useful tool to kind of have in your toolbox, because at the end of the semester, you should really be able to look at every single thing listed on here. So every single, did any of these occur before the incident? Do any of these provoke it? And you should be able to kind of look at all these symptoms and be able to say, what diagnosis are they leaning towards? What am I gathering from them saying yes or no to this? And the best way to do that, and I know there's a ton of work in this class, the best way to do that is to learn the disorders and to read about them, read the research on them. The Barney Society is really, really great. VITA is really a great resource. Learning the disorders will help you so much. Learning what the test results look like, reading case studies. Another great place to read case studies is on AIB's website, dizzy.com. If you go to it, they have all of their published studies that they've done, which is a lot of case studies. You can get them all for free, which I know you guys have access to your school's library, but this is just in addition. More case studies specifically, because sometimes, really scientific research can be, not that it doesn't serve a purpose, but it's hard when you're training to be a clinical audiologist to really learn. So learning those case studies can be really helpful. Seeing the test results, seeing how they look. There's a really good one on there of a patient that I saw when I was there who had bilateral dysfunction. Which, if you've heard from anybody, bilateral dysfunction, people claim like you can't. Well, if your ears don't work, if they both don't work, you're kind of out of luck, especially as you get older, because everyone knows that as you get older, what goes? Your vision goes, you get cataracts, macular degeneration, just vision changes in general. What else goes? Your orthopedic, you start getting ankle, feet, knee, neuropathy, all these issues. We really rely on our vestibular system as we get older, because it's, I would say, the least likely to degrade as we get older. But there's a great case study on there for a guy that he had bilateral dysfunction. Really, his ears didn't work at all. He was also deaf, postlingually deafened, and he also had vision issues, and he had neuropathy, and he wanted to go on a fishing trip. Like a deep sea fishing trip in Florida. And he spent a lot of time in PT, and when I tell you the outcomes he worked very hard, but his post-treatment outcomes, he did CDP. The first time we did it, we had to defer testing. He couldn't stand up there without really feeling like he was gonna fall. We then did it afterwards, and he was pretty much able to get through the whole battery within normal limits. So there's a lot of great things that you can learn from case studies. So it's another just really great resource. It's dizzy.com. You can find